Throughout the ages, these sites were widely considered to be gates to the underworld. Some people held that these went straight to hell, while others believed they led to fantastical visions of the afterlife. Good evening, everyone. My name is Boomslang, and tonight I'll be talking about some places that hold spiritual and historical significance to a variety of different religions and countries. Hekla is a fiery stratovolcano located deep within the southern mountain ranges of Iceland. Vikings believed it to be the realm of the goddess of sickness and death, known as Hel. It was widely considered the literal mouth of hell by Icelanders even before it erupted and covered Europe in choking ash in 1104 AD. This eruption covered half of Iceland in massive chunks of pumice, the size of small cars, and choked out many survivors with toxic residue and deadly fumes. The resulting stories of the devastation of Hekla's eruption resulted in many considering it a place that offered a window into a realm of eternal damnation. Bishops and cardinals often considered Hekla proof that hell existed beneath the known world, and Saint Benedict believed it to be the eternal prison of Judas Iscariot. Explorers from Europe, who made penance by going to Iceland, claimed to have witnessed massive bird-like monsters hovering over the embers in the volcano's center and carrying the bodies of the damned in their talons. Due to the stories surrounding Hekla, no one in recorded history was recorded attempting to climb to the summit until the 18th century, and after that point, the stigma surrounding the summit began to wane. Today, Icelanders still claim that covens of witches gather near Hekla each Easter. Cape Matapan is a small piece of land that lies at the end of the Mani Peninsula in Greece. In Greek myths, a cave on the tip of the cape served as a source to the underworld. Hercules entered the caves on a mission to capture Cerberus, in atonement for slaying his family in a fit of rage induced by Hera. Orpheus used the Matapan caves to retrieve his wife, Eurydice, from the halls of Hades. Multiple temples were built near the cave system by Spartan priests, and a former temple to Poseidon still exists on a hill above the cave's mouth. Later on, the Byzantines arrived, and the temple was converted into a church. Despite the church blessings that were placed on the site, I can't imagine what it would have felt like to go to the first service in a former temple located above a place that supposedly led into the underworld. In addition to the converted temple, an abandoned city by the name of Taenarum lies nearby on the peninsula. This city was built by Spartan slaves, produced some of the most beautiful purple dyes in the ancient world, before being ravaged by an earthquake in 464 BC. Ancient histories thought that the earthquake was divine retribution sent by Poseidon after Spartan mercenaries killed a group of townspeople who had taken refuge in his temple. At the moment, the caves can be visited by boat due to the fact that they are partially submerged by rising tides. The Lake of Curtius exists as a pave-over chasm that, while not looking like much, is the site of an ancient tale given by the historian Livy. In ancient history, an oracle at the Roman Forum predicted the fall of the capital city and said that the only way the city could survive was to sacrifice that which was most dear to her people. Soon after, a deep pit opened up near the Forum. A nearby military officer named Marcus Curtius believed that the dearest thing to Rome was her soldiers. He put on his full battle armor, mounted his horse, and rushed into the pit. The deep gash in the earth in the Forum closed behind the horsemen. Rome's destruction was prevented by one man willing to sacrifice himself for his city. Over time, the area where the chasm was once located was made into a courtyard with a small central pool, and the story of the cavalrymen is commemorated in present day by a small stone slab with the image of a man on horseback. The City of Ghosts is located in China. Fengdu is a popular tourist attraction that has existed for close to 2,000 years. The area was said to be founded by two state officials who retreated into the wilderness and eventually achieved immortality. They were named Yin and Wang, and they were immortalized as kings of the underworld. Many places in the city reference the afterlife, and particularly hell, with names like Ridge of Helplessness and Palace of Hell. Artistic depictions of ghosts and supernatural creatures cover the city streets, and Fangdu is dominated by a massive statue of a dead royal named the Ghost King. Souls are said to be arrested by officers of the underworld immediately after death. They are then taken before the King of Hell to be judged. There are courts of punishment in this place, with each set aside for different sins committed in past life, similar to the layers of hell in Dante's Inferno. A detail I found hilarious is that there's an entire court of punishments simply called administrative errors, which makes sense for the particularly meticulous governments of the early dynasties. After all, this is a culture that produced paper, ink, and exams. Making a logistical or analytical error that screws something up is simply unforgivable. The Aktun Tuchil Muknal Cave roughly translates to Cave of the Crystal Sepulchre and is often referred to by its initials, ATM. This webway of passages in Belize is a hotbed for ancient Mayan legends. The Mayans described a hellish subterranean labyrinth ruled over by the demonic warriors known as the Lords of Xibalba. These demons had names like Flying Scab, Bone Staff, and Stabbing Demon, and they were the opposite of benevolent supernatural creatures. This landscape was said to include rivers of blood and giant scorpions, making it sound a little like the Realm of Corn from the Warhammer Fantasy universe. The cave is open to small touring groups, and contains the bodies of many young people who were brutally killed in order to appease the local gods. The most famous of the skeletons that reside in the cave is the Crystal Princess, a small skeleton whose bones shimmer from 1,000 years of calcification. This gate to the underworld was thought to be fictitious by many scholars until its discovery in Turkey in 2013. The Gate of Pluto was described by the Greek philosopher Strabo as full of a vapor so misty and dense that one can scarcely see the ground. Any animal that passes through meets instant death. I threw in sparrows. They immediately breathed their last and fell. This site was known as the Temple of Pluto to the Romans, and many travelers in the time of the Roman Empire would watch in awe as the temple's priests took bulls into the caves, only for the bulls to keel over dead, while the priests emerged unharmed. The priests would often venture into the cave to enter deep trances and commune with the god Pluto. These deep hallucinogenic states were brought on by the fumes emanating from deep within the depths. These gases were said to be coming from an entrance to hell deep beneath the temple. Scientists have attributed these effects to noxious carbon dioxide emanating from an underground stream. The gas is still so potent that after archaeologists opened the caves, birds flying over the temple dropped dead from exposure. Guinea is a prominent location in the folklore of voodoo practitioners. This part of the afterlife is not a place of punishment, as much as an area that souls must cross to reach the place where they will be reunited with their ancestors. Guinea is ruled by a powerful spirit named Baron Samedi, who guards the crossroads of this plane. The Seven Gates of Guinea are the primary way of accessing the spirits of the recently deceased. Some voodoo groups see them not as a physical location, but a metaphor. These groups say that the soul remains near the body for 7 days, and passes through a gate each day after death, a time in which the newly dead are in danger of being enslaved as zombies. Other people claim that 7 literal gates exist in the cemeteries that lie throughout New Orleans. To begin your journey towards the afterlife, many say that the tomb of a powerful voodoo priestess named Mary Laveau, is the starting point for anyone aiming to enter Guinea. After that, you must bring offerings to each of the spirits that guard the following 6 spots. Going to these sites in the wrong order will result in vengeful spirits manifesting in the physical world and dragging you into the realm of the dead. Chinoki Jigoku, or Bloody Hell Pond, is located in Beppu City, Japan. Beppu City is known for its 8 geothermal hotspots, nicknamed the 8 Gates to Hell, or the Great 8 Gates to Hell, or, if Bill Gates bought them and didn't like them and then sold the gates to a soothsayer, Gates' Great 8 hated Gates of Fate. Legend says that 2 Japanese deities once visited this place, and one of them became debilitatingly weakened by constant illness. The other god was concerned, and placed a long pipe that extended from the sea to Beppu to help the sick god heal. The water revived him and made him healthy again. Later on, a sanatorium was built during the Kamakura period to help cure the wounded samurais who had fought against the Mongol invaders. One of these pools gained infamy as Bloody Hell Pond for its resemblance to the Buddhist Gate to Hell. Its water is blood red and is far too hot to be used for bathing, averaging 172 degrees Fahrenheit or 78 degrees Celsius. Hellam Township was founded in 1739, and at first glance is charming and relatively nondescript if you don't know about the deep infamy concerning the stories about the area surrounding the little town. One popular story surrounding this section of Pennsylvania is that an insane asylum once existed southwest of the township. This site had 7 gates surrounding the fenced-in courtyard of the asylum, and one day, a fire broke out inside of the main building. Despite their attempts, none of the inmates were able to escape due to the gates barring their path and were left unburied, leaving the angry souls of the dead to haunt the courtyard. The second version of the story tells of an eccentric doctor who set up a series of gates along a winding path that led deep into the nearby forest. The man was invested in pursuit of the occult, rumored that these gates led into hell. Urban legends say that if you follow Trout Run Road in the northwestern section of Hellam Township, you will find the doctor's gates. If you follow them in order, it's highly recommended that you turn back before arriving at the 5th gate, as no one has ever emerged after passing that point. If you want to avoid dying in New Orleans, make sure to pass the gates in order. If you don't want to die in Pennsylvania, don't follow the gates in order. Also, Illinois has its own 7 gates to hell in Collinsville. They're all bridges passing under railroad trestles that supposedly lead into hell. The Ishtar Gate is currently located in Berlin. This gate was once an entrance to the great city of Babylon and was actually transversed by the prophet Daniel, recorded in Daniel chapter 1 when he entered the city during the Israelite captivity. This gate was the primary entrance of the 8 gates leading into Babylon, was one of the many great wonders attributed to the kings of this realm. The lions covering this gate were the symbol of the goddess Ishtar. She can be most closely associated with the Greek and Roman pantheons Aphrodite, or Venus. The most famous tale surrounding Ishtar was her descent into hell through a gate to rescue her lover. This gate was built to commemorate the one that Ishtar passed into to enter the underworld. My question is, does that mean that Babylon was supposed to be hell? Or does that mean the rest of the world outside of Babylon was supposed to be comparatively horrible next to Babylon? My headcanon is that this was the city builder's subliminal diss of the entirety of the rest of Mesopotamia. The gates of hell are open night and day, smooth the descent, and easy the way. This phrase was written by the famous Roman poet Virgil in the Aeneid. Before he was guiding Dante through hell in Dante's fanfic, Inferno, and staring sullenly while seated in a plastic lawn chair, Virgil was busy writing the Roman take on the traditional stories of Homer and other Greek storytellers who told their tales verbally. In the Aeneid, the Trojan hero Aeneas, with the guidance of an oracle called the Sibyl, entered the underworld to search for the spirit of his father. Keeping on theme, our next entry is called the Necromantion, an even older entryway where oracles would commune with the dead. The ancient Greeks believed that the dead entered Hades through subterranean fissures, and this structure from the 4th century BC was built on the confluence of 3 rivers associated with Hades. This site was built on a site of great spiritual significance, was a place where the living could ask the will of the dead through the oracles who lived there. The most famous appearance of the Necromantion is Homer's Odyssey, where Odysseus intended to find the soul of a man who could predict his destiny. Odysseus saw a lot more going on than he intended to. Thus solemn rites and holy vows we paid to all the phantom nations of the dead. Then died the sheep, a purple torrent flowed, and all the caverns smoked with streaming blood. When lo, appeared along the dusky coasts, thin, airy shoals of visionary ghosts, fair, pensive youths, and soft, enamored maids, and withered elders, pale and wrinkled shades, ghastly with wounds, the forms of warriors slain, stalked with majestic port, a martial train. These, and 1,000 more, swarmed o'er the ground, and all the dire assembly shrieked around. Astonished at the sight, aghast I stood, and a cold fear ran shivering through my blood. Straight I command the sacrifice to haste, straight the flayed victims to the flames are cast, and muttered vows, a mystic song applied to grisly Pluto and his gloomy bride. The moral of the story is to be careful when talking with those who have a literal connection to hell. It's easy to be caught up in the visions of dead warriors and those who've passed away in the Greek canon of the underworld. The Sibyl was said to be the former lover of Apollo, who, in exchange for becoming his lover, gained an abnormally long life. In one of her initial conversations with the god, she picked up a handful of sand, asked for a life that would last as long as the grains of sand. Later on, she refused the god's love and withered away gradually, and legends say that she lived for roughly 900 years, eventually bringing on an order of women who existed to connect the realms of the living and the dead. Eventually, the location of the cave of the Sibyl was lost to posterity, with many explorers in the medieval period failing to find the entrance. It was eventually rediscovered in 1932 by an archaeologist named Amedeo Maiuri. The description of the cave and the structures built into it from the Aeneid lined up almost perfectly with the archaeologist's discovery. Aga people of Tanzania believe that Mount Kilimanjaro contains 2 gates to 2 separate afterlives. One leads to paradise and is typically described to be near the point on the mountain where the earth and the sky join, while the realm of the lost souls is in a deep cave beneath the mountain. One of the more interesting beliefs of the Chaga tribes is that great events throughout history reverberate in the spirit world, like the 2 realms in the Talisman book by Stephen King and Peter Straub. For instance, when the European powers subjugated the African continent and forced the natives to pay taxes, the ghosts of the dead also began to waste away, were forced to pay taxes to the ghosts of the colonists. The Hauska Castle is uncanny. Many of the windows in its impressive facade are fake. It's not positioned near any strategically important trade routes like other fortresses from this period, and its battlements, parapets, protective positions are faced towards its interior courtyard. It's built in a cliff, surrounded by deep forest. The most interesting of the legends surrounding the place is that it was built to protect the surrounding villages from the horrors that emerged from a deep pit called the Gateway to Hell. The villagers had to constantly defend against half-human, half-animal creatures that continually crawled out of the pit's depths at night to drag victims back into the pit with them. At one point, the townspeople offered a prisoner charged with the death sentence an opportunity to escape his sentence by exploring the pit. They sent him down into the abyss with a rope tied around his waist. After an unrecorded period of time, the man was raised back up after he was heard screaming. The young prisoner had rapidly aged had gone completely insane from his time in the depths of the pit. Eventually, the villagers banded together to cover the pit with stones and to build a chapel to the Archangel Michael, and for good measure, build a castle around the chapel. After all, dedicating a church to the leader of the armies of God, then surrounding that area with fortifications seems really smart when you're dealing with existential threats or continuously dragging your friends and family away. The interior of the chapel is decorated with intricate frescoes depicting Michael slaying demons and fighting dragons. The castle faded from history until the 20th century. After the annexation of Czechoslovakia, Hauska Castle was used as a headquarters for an occult research division of the Wehrmacht during World War II. The German High Command, especially the leaders of the SS, were increasingly interested in occult research and the possibilities offered by harnessing the supernatural as weapons in a war. Locals who lived near the castle during this period reported seeing strange lights and screaming emanating from within the castle's walls. Allegedly, Himmler attended dark ceremonies to attempt to harness the powers of hell. The skeletal remains of multiple men in German army uniforms were found in the castle courtyard by Allied forces in the later months of the war. In addition, some 13,000 occult manuscripts belonging to Himmler were found in storage deep within the castle's walls. Reading the initial story immediately made me believe that this castle inspired stuff like the Old Blood. The castle opened to visitors in 1999, and now it's possible to go see the chapel and the castle interior for yourself. Stoll, Kansas is another victim of the slow decay of the Great Plains. While the town is almost dead, the legend surrounding it continues to thrive among University of Kansas students. There are a couple of solidly okay creepypastas based off this site. Rumors surrounding the town began in the late 70s, as sightings of demonic entities and other supernatural events were said to be happening in the local cemetery. Although it is currently demolished, a local church was located nearby. It was said that if you were near the church at night, you counted more than 7 windows on the outside of the church building, the gate to the biblical hell was about to open. The most popular tale surrounding this area was that if you went to the basement under the church, back when it was still standing, you would find a staircase that continuously went down further and further into the soil underneath the church, until you reached the depths of hell itself. This place runs along the northeast shore of the Big Island in the Hawaiian island chain. The Waipa Valley mouth extends for a mile and runs 6 miles into the island's interior. The shore at its mouth is a popular tourist destination, as it features beautiful black sand. Before the arrival of Captain Cook in 1778, it was recorded as being inhabited by some 4,000 residents. As the valley was lush, presented one of the best areas to live in, Big Island. It was also the site of many great battles between rival chieftains, and the first naval battle, conducted with firearms in Hawaiian history, took place within sight of the shore. It was later abandoned, resettled by migrant laborers, and abandoned again after a fierce tsunami in 1946. The valley carries great significance in Hawaiian worship and mythology, as it contains the remains of several ancient temples and multiple burial spots of ancient kings. Multiple myths are centered around this area, including the story of Nenue, the shark man, the son of a shark and a local woman who was killed after he ate several villagers. However, the reason it earns its spot in this video is due to the fact that a supposed entrance to the lower world, called Lua o Milu, lies nearby. It's said that you can find your way into the land of the dead by leaping off one of the cliffs overlooking the sea on either side of the valley. And finally, Hacienda Heights is the last place to feature in the video. The Hacienda Heights gates carry a deep mystique in the community. Popular stories about this barred path discuss Special K meetings and a mysterious plane crash near Turnbull Canyon in 1952. This place was once the dwelling place of the Gabrielino Indian tribe, whose disturbed ghosts are said to stalk the canyon from time to time. It's said that war drums can be occasionally heard at night. And of course, there's the story of Robert Turnbull, the man whose name adorns the road that runs into the canyon. Here's an excerpt from a Whittier College student newspaper. Robert Turnbull was a shepherd who moved to California seeking to make money in real estate. The first patch of land he bought was located in LA near the Macy Street Bridge, now known as the Cesar Chavez Bridge. Not long after moving to California, Turnbull gained a reputation as the town drunk. It is said that people who had known Turnbull and did business with him never saw him completely sober. His drunkenness would later be a leading factor in his murder. At around the same time, Turnbull was making his way in real estate. The owners of the Temple Workman Bank, William Workman, and his son-in-law, FPF Temple, were poorly managing their business. In 1875, the state's economy collapsed, and the bank was unable to meet the demands of the townspeople. Unable to save their business, the bank was closed in January of 1876. In May of 1876, Richard Garvey told Workman that Elias J. Lucky Baldwin, a landowner investing in the LA area real estate market, was going to foreclose on his property. A couple days later, Workman grabbed his revolver and exited the Apex Legends lobby. Following the downfall of the Temple Workman Bank and the death of Workman, Turnbull was appointed to an advisory committee that consisted of the bank's largest creditors. The committee was to work toward getting the townspeople their money back, but whether they did or not is unclear. Being part of the advisory committee, Turnbull was able to buy land for cheap. That is when he decided to buy Turnbull Canyon, which cost him almost nothing. Turnbull liked the canyon because it was a great place for sheep, whose wool made him great profit, and it had an active stream. In 1885, two Quaker men, Aquila Pickering and Jonathan Bailey, were searching for land in California to start a new colony. They purchased land surrounding the canyon, and seeing that the canyon had the water resources they needed to start their new settlement, they approached Robert Turnbull and offered to buy the land. Knowing the value his land had, Turnbull refused to sell it. For 2 years, the Quakers continued to make Turnbull offers, and in June of 1887, they presented to Turnbull their final and highest offer of $30,000. That was nearly half the money the Quakers invested in what is now known as the Uptown Whittier area. Finally, Turnbull accepted their offer. On January 18, 1888, Robert Turnbull spent the evening as he had many others, drinking. On his way back home, he fell off his horse and was arrested for public drunkenness. The next morning, after spending a night in jail, Turnbull returned home with a broken, bruised, and bloodied face. He had been beaten, but could not recall how. As a result of his injuries, the next day, Turnbull succumbed to a brain aneurysm that the coroner said was the result of a blow to the head. The aneurysm caused Turnbull to fall off the Macy Bridge into the LA River, where his body was later discovered. Coroners concluded that Turnbull had been murdered. When the Quakers got news that Turnbull had died, they decided to name the canyon after him, since he was kind enough to sell them that land. Outside of these stories, the gates at Hacienda were often rumored to be the site of multiple cult gatherings and activities. In addition, multiple bodies have been found in this area over the past couple of decades. It continues to be a meeting site for the Special K. One tourist, walking up the hill at night to see the gates, recorded being met by a group of men dressed in those white bedsheet-looking cloak things and told to leave. Of all the places on this iceberg, this is the one that I would highly recommend skipping due to the continued presence of these people, the multiple bodies disposed of here by criminal gangs, and likely curses laid here by the Native Americans. If you're in the Midwest, check out Stowell, Kansas. If you're closer to the East Coast, check out Hellam. If you're on the West Coast, just don't try to go to Hacienda Heights. It would really suck if you were found beat up on the side of the road. Alright, that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to see more things like this, like the video and maybe even check out the other videos on this channel. I'll be doing a few more of these shorter form videos to mix up my routine a little more, then I'll cover more icebergs. Swapping format is really what prevents me from burning out too quickly. I'll see you around. Take care, and good night.